Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today on Wednesday, the 30th of March, 2022 on Vision Store's Exploring Technology webinar with David Woodbridge. And this month's webinar is on getting the most out of your Android devices. My name is Tony Wu, and I'll be one of your co-hosts, and I'm joined by my fellow colleagues, David Woodbridge, who is our Vision Store AT advisor, and special guest, Jim Pipsack, who is one of our AT leads at Vision Australia. I would like to begin the session by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. The webinar will be recorded for those who cannot stay for the entire session, and you can access the recording later by visiting our Vision Australia YouTube channel. This is an interactive session, so please submit any questions that you may have for David or Jim throughout the session by using our chat box. For those that use a screen reader, you can access the chat function through keystroke Alt-H or Command-H. We'll answer as many questions as best we can, as many as time permits. Welcome, Jim and David.
Good morning or good afternoon or whatever, depending on when you listen to this, I guess.
And where from?
Absolutely. Yep. So in this webinar, what we're going to try and do is go through and discuss Android, and we're primarily going to be focusing on Android phones and tablets. And then if we get time, we'll also talk about Android TV. So we thought, so the rough format's going to be talking about Android in general, then talking about the main accessibility features, and then talking about some apps. And then also, too, if we get time, we'll also talk about the Synaptic launcher, which can make your phone easier to use rather than using straight Android. And also the Blind Shell Classic 2, which is a dedicated phone. Unlike Synaptic, which runs on any Android phone, the Blind Shell uses its own dedicated launcher. So in an actual fact, you're actually using the Blind Shell phone, not just an Android phone that's got a launcher like Synaptic running on it. So let me go back to the beginning and start talking about Android in general. And Jim, you can pop in and we can ask questions of each other as we go. And Tony will be monitoring the questions. So if you've got any questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the chat. So the first thing I want to mention about Android is that Android is available, or the operating system is available on lots and lots and lots of phones. So Apple, which, iOS is only available on the iPhone. With Android, you've got all different brand names. So the ones that we tend to favour at Vision Australia is primarily Samsung. And you've also got LG, HTC, you've got Google's own phone itself, which is the Pixel, and other brands of phones. And depending on the brand of phone is also dependent on what version of Android may be running on the phone. So, for example, if you have a Pixel phone, then you're pretty much guaranteed that you'll have the latest and greatest operating version of Android running, because that's Google's own phone. Because with LG, HTC, and Samsung, it really depends on when those manufacturers get around to updating the Android operating system on their own systems. And speaking of Android versions, the current version of Android is 12. And of course, 13 will be out this year. And Google, like Apple, has a developer conference, and the developer conference is called Google I/O. And that'll be coming up later this year, like I said, where they'll be introducing Android 13. So that's just the preliminary stuff to talk about with Android, the fact that it's on all different phones. I'm probably going to my comments are on Samsung. Jim, what's your current phone that you seem to be working on at the moment for Android?
I'm playing with Samsung at the moment. And I suppose mentioning all of those phones with Android, it's a good thing. But it's also an awkward thing, because all of the different manufacturers tend to have their menus different. So, to fix a particular problem on Samsung might be a little different to fix it on an LG, because, the thing you're looking for is in a different spot. So that's what makes Android great and awkward at times.
You know, it's actually interesting because I came across I think it was an Optima phone a year or two ago, and it was a great phone. The problem was that it wouldn't run the built-in screen-reader Talkback properly. So you could run Talkback, but it just refused to read the screen, which I thought was absolutely amazingly horrible. So that's the thing about Android, that it's very flexible, it's very open, it's on lots of phones, but you can run into other issues because what the manufacturers do, they stick their own overlay on top of, if you like, the generic version of Android running, and that's the stuff that sort of can interfere with running accessibility. One of the benefits of running Android is, and I'm assuming this is available on all Androids. I can't speak to this one, but it's certainly available on the phones that I've used. And it's not, I mean, it's an accessibility feature, but I think iPhone should have this as well. And that's where you can assign the power button and the volume up button to do certain functions, including you can set the volume up button to answer an incoming call, and the power button, or on my Samsung, it's also the Bixby button, the voice assistant, to hang up the actual call. So when somebody rings me on my Samsung phone, I can just press volume up to answer, and I can press the Bixby or power button to hang up a call. So rather than having to worry about the two-finger double tap, which also works on Android, I just press a physical button. So to me, that's going back to the old-fashioned Nokia days back in the early 2000s, where you could actually easily have hardware buttons to answer and hang up. Do you think I'm right in assuming, Jim, that that's available on most Android phones, not just Samsung?
I'm pretty sure it is, because that's a generic feature. It's not an accessibility feature. I think one of the strange accessibility features on Android is read to end. There is no gesture for read to end. You actually shake the phone to read to end. It's a really strange feature, and I'm sure that they'll fix that eventually and put a keystroke or a gesture in for it. But yeah, it's one of the strangest ones I've seen.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
It is.
Oh dear. The other thing I should mention about answering and hang up a phone call and I'm presuming this may be also for the Fold, but I know on the Samsung Z3 Flip, which is the Samsung phone that folds in half, you can set it so that when you open the phone as well, so you open up the little clamshell to, full extension, it will actually answer a call, and when you close the phone, it'll hang up the call as well. So that's actually quite a handy one.
David, perhaps you should explain the difference between a flip and a fold.
I know, because they're actually, so what I've got in front of me here,
12:38 p.m.
and I've just picked my phone up, so that's my phone talking through the mixer. Let me just turn it down so you can't hear it keep blabbing on it. We are on this. Just going to turn it down. All right, so this is a flip. This is a flip phone that also folds. So if I open it up, this probably is not very visual on the camera, but right in the middle is actually, I can feel like an indent where the actual screen folds in when I push the phone closed, and then open it up again, it comes back to a full screen. So this is the Z3 Flip. Now the Z3 Fold, rather than the Z3 folding from the top to the bottom, the Samsung Z3 Fold actually folds in half. So
like
it's like a book, correct? Exactly. Yeah. Now that's completely different from your old-fashioned, or even sometimes some of the feature phones where you open them up and you've got a screen on one side of the phone and you've normally got a keyboard on the other. They're sort of your more traditional flip phones. But the Samsung ones, they actually fold in half, like the Z3 Flip, or fold in like a book, like Jim said, which is the Fold. And apparently, and I don't know how many years this is going to be, Jim, but apparently they're registered for 200,000 opening and closing. So
Okay.
that would fairly be a long time. I don't know how many times I
two
unfold it.
drops.
Yeah, I know, that's right. And the really cool thing about it on at least the Z3 is that right at the front here, I've got a little 1.9-inch screen, and that's also live. So when you fold the phone or flip the phone closed, that screen becomes live. So I can check the screen for notifications. I can also control my music if I'm listening to an audio book or listening to Spotify. I can check weather. I can take a voice note. I can check my daily step count, battery, all that sort of stuff. So they're called widgets, and you can turn whatever widget you want on and off within the settings of the phone.
It's quite similar to a lot of the old Nokia phones, so the Nokia flip phones. That same
Yeah,
little
well, that's
principle.
true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So it is quite nice. Of course, the other thing you can also do with Android, the same you can do with iOS, but probably not so much straightforward, is you can plug in a USB-C keyboard and, of course, a Bluetooth keyboard. And there are shortcut keys like on iOS with the iPhone stuff for navigating the operating system, as well as using the built-in screen reader, which is called Talkback. Yeah, and now in case you haven't caught up with this factor in the last 12 months, there used to be a screen reader for Samsung called Voice View. That's no longer available anymore. Samsung stopped developing it. So now the screen reader for Samsung phones is your same screen reader for other Android phones, which is Talkback. So that's the name of the screen reader, and by default it's normally installed. When I got my Samsung phone, when I turned it on, I just held down 2 fingers on the screen and it came up and asked me, did I want to initiate Talkback, the screen reader? And if I did, I just had to keep holding 2 fingers on the screen and it came up talking. And here's a tip that I got trapped by. When you don't have any headphones plugged into an Android phone, so you're using the loudspeaker, because most modern phones these days don't have a 3.5mm headphone jack, they use Bluetooth. So you don't normally have anything Bluetooth connected like a pair of headphones. When you go in to enter your password into, say, your Gmail account or your Wi-Fi network, because Android thinks, well, you don't want your password being read out, do you? It's going to say bullet, bullet, bullet for just the straight keyboard, as well as you trying to enter in your characters for your password. So what you can do is, in screen reader terms, if you flick past the password field, it's got a checkbox that says show password. And if you turn that on, so one finger double tap like a normal screen reader command, then when you access the keyboard will also speak the letters plus the password. So that's what I get caught. I'm assuming visually, Jimmy, if you don't check that checkbox and it's just bullet points, I'm assuming you would just get dots coming up on the screen, wouldn't you?
That's correct.
Yep. Yeah. So that's just the warning that if you're setting this up, check the checkbox and it says show password, and you'll be fine. The layout of the Android system is very similar to iOS, what you get on the iPhone. So really, you've got your main screen, which contains your icons. So, settings, mail, phone, messages, and so on. At the top of the screen, you've got your status menu, which traditionally contains notifications, your Wi-Fi state, your Bluetooth state, if you've been playing music, what that is. Battery, yeah, Wi-Fi connection, your mobile phone state, all that sort of cool stuff. And then down the bottom, now I know some launchers, Jim, call it the dock. I don't know if it's got an official name, but I just call it the navigation bar down the bottom. And that contains three options: back, home, and recent. So back is pretty straightforward. When you go into a screen, you can tap the software button. The reason why I say software is because it's on the screen. There's no physical button. You tap the back button to go back a screen, and the home button is to take you back to the home screen out of an app. And then the recent button, oh, hello, that's my iPad talking to me. Then the recent button is like your app switcher in iOS on the iPhone. So that brings up a whole list of your current apps where you can close individual apps down, you close all apps. And just a warning about that list, you'll actually have 2 items per application. So you have like settings, and then you have another button which says advanced items. So it's like it'd be settings, advanced setting options, Twitter advanced options. I just heard that one. I just heard the questions about the accessibility for that. That's under accessibility options under settings. So that's normally available from your home screen. Go into settings, go into accessibility, and you'll find it in there. So just be aware that you'll have 2 options per application with each of those items on the recents. So really when you go into an app, so let's say I go into the ABC Listen app, down the bottom, I'm going to have that the back, home and recents button. And if I go back to the main home screen, I can just tap on the home button and come back out of there. If I've gone into a screen inside ABC Listen, so let's say I've gone into to browse podcasts and I'm viewing the podcast, if I press the back button, I'm not going to come back out of the ABC Listen app back to the home screen. I'm going to come back to the previous screen inside the ABC Listen app. So it just sort of works as expected. And I guess the nice thing about those buttons down the bottom is that unlike VoiceOver on iOS, where you've got to remember the gestures going up from the bottom of the screen or from the top of the screen going down, on Android, you've always got these back, home and recent buttons down the bottom. And you can also set on under accessibility another option on that bottom screen called accessibility. And you can choose whether to turn options on and off via that accessibility menu. And for me, I've also got the volume up and down set to, so I can actually press the volume up and down for 3 seconds, and that turns on Talkback or turns off Talkback. And of course, like iOS, if you've got more than one option set to be turned on, that screen comes up with what's like a dollar box, and you can choose what accessibility options you want to access that way. That comes in quite handy. Any comments so far, Jim?
Yeah, I was going to say it's a bit tricky that holding down the volume up and volume down. That can be tricky because if you don't do them at exactly the same time, then you can turn the volume right down to nothing and not realise.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so you've got to be really careful to press them both at the same time. And the other thing about the back button is to think of it as coming back one level at a time. So if you're in the menu systems, it's three levels in. So pressing the back button, you'll just come back one level at a time.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah. Now, I should remind people that and we're going to talk about more apps in a minute, but the Vision Australia Library app for Vision Australia Library is also available on the Google Play Store. And that's where you can search for and download all the different apps that you might want to use on Android. And there's quite a lot of them ones that we tend to recommend and use for iOS, and the same sort of ones like the ABC Listen app, the Vision Australia Connect app for the library, and so on. And then just one final thing before we get on to talk about more about the accessibility, I just want to mention these wonderful things called launchers. And the launcher basically makes the whole phone act differently as far as the home screens and the way that apps are accessed. And you can get lots of different launchers. So, for example, you can even get a launcher that makes your phone look like iOS 15. So rather than having, so it'll have things like your mail, your settings. Rather than Apple Maps, it'll have Google Maps. Rather than App Store, it'll have Google Play Store. But for all intents and purposes, it looks like you're using iOS 15. You can get ones that if you're a low vision user and you want bigger icons, you can get lots of different launchers for low vision. So there's ones called Big Launcher. There's ones for seniors called the Senior Launcher, and lots of other ones. Jim, do you have any particular launchers that you've come across in the past that you've liked?
Probably Big Launcher I've played with in the past, and I thought that was pretty reasonable. But as you said, there's a lot of them, and some people just try them all out, or at least try a few out until they find one they like. And most people don't. There's some that nothing suits everyone, and that's one of those things that's just a truism.
And it was quite funny because I know one thing that put me off when I first started using Samsung. I kept asking somebody, why does my phone keep saying One UI all the time when I go back to the home screen? And that's because it's the name of the launcher. So I thought there was a problem with the screen reader. I was like, no, that's your launcher. Because if you run like Big Launcher or Microsoft Launcher or iOS 15 Launcher, every time you go back to the home screen, because you're effectively running an app, it actually says the name of the app. So I thought, that makes sense now. The other thing about these launchers is that when you run them, it'll give you an option to say, do you want to make this the default, or do you want to just run this one time? And particularly when you're testing these things out, you just say, no, I just want to use this one time. So that then when you restart your phone, if you like, you can go back to your other launcher rather than, having a default one that you think, oh, geez, I wish I hadn't chosen this one. Now I've got to go through settings and reset it. Now, I should say up front, there's 2 apps that you won't currently get that I know we recommend at Vision Australia. And that's the Seeing AI app from Microsoft. That's not available from Android. And of course, that's the app where you've got things like barcode reading, short text, you've got product identification, you've got handwriting mode, light detection, the fantastic LiDAR world channel where you can actually see how far things are away from you. And then, of course, the Soundscape app, which is the one that's based around beacons. That's also not available on Android. So if we sort of slide over to accessibility a little bit more, so I know we've talked about the buttons for volume up and volume down. That was a good tip, Jim, about the not getting it quite right, so you end up turning your volume down. Do you have any sort of favourite accessibility things that you'd like to do on the phone when you're demonstrating Android?
Yeah, there's the zoom feature on Android, I think, is a really good one, and I'd kind of like to see it on iOS, I must admit. iOS has their zoom feature, of course, but the one thing that Samsung does nicely is a temporary zoom. So once it's turned on, if you double tap on the screen and hold your finger down on the second tap, the magnifier comes up, and wherever you move your finger to is where it's magnified. Lift your finger and the magnification goes away. So it's that temporary magnification. With iOS, you need to double tap to bring it up, double tap again to turn it off. You also have that feature, of course, if you want a magnification on all the time with Android, and you can do that. But that temporary zoom feature is a really good one. And whilst you're holding your finger down on the screen and it's magnified, you can put another finger on the screen and pull it apart to zoom in, or pull them back together again to zoom out. But I'd just like that really quick. You want to just read a text message, double tap and hold, move your finger around, read it, lift your finger, and it's gone. It's a really nice feature.
No, that's nice. With the built-in screen reader Talkback, so that's like having VoiceOver on the iPhone. Well, this is for Android and it's Talkback. One of the things up front that I should tell you about with Talkback is, and it's annoying, is lots of times, particularly with VoiceOver users, we have a thing called audio ducking. And what happens with audio ducking is that when you're listening to music or an audio book and you've got audio ducking turned on, it actually ducks the media or your talking book that you listen to under the voice of, say, VoiceOver or Talkback, in this case on Android, so you can concentrate more on what the screen reader's saying to you, which makes sense. The problem with Talkback on Android, and this is on my, my brand new Z3 flip phone, it doesn't audio duck. It actually stops the audio completely. So if you're listening to a talking book or you're listening to music, the media will stop it will then allow the screen reader, in this case Talkback, to say what it's going to say, and then it'll restart the media playing after the speech is finished speaking to you, which is really, really irritating. So I suggest one of the first things you do with Talkback, and I've fed this back to Google, is turn off audio ducking because it will drive you crazy. And the way that you get into settings on Talkback is two ways. You can either go to Settings, Accessibility, Talkback, and then Settings, or Talkback has these gestures called angle gestures. So they're where you drag your finger down the screen, and then you go left or right, and then take your finger up. Or you do the reverse. You go up the screen and go left and right, and then take your finger off. So the way to get into settings with an actual Talkback gesture is to drag. It's like drawing an L on the screen. You drag your finger down the screen and go to the right, take your finger off, and that will take you into the Talkback settings. And then your normal gestures to do with one finger flick left to go to the previous, or one finger flick right to go to the next, and one finger double tap to open up an item, which is the similar for VoiceOver on iOS. That'll all work the same. So you don't necessarily have to use that. You can still go into settings under accessibility for Talkback. Excuse me. And you've also got other gestures in those angle gestures to do similar things. So, for example, if I don't want to go back down to the bottom of the navigation bar and double tap on the back button, I can do a one finger flick down the screen and then over to the left. So it's a back to front L. Or if I want to do a home button function, again, rather than having to go down to the middle of the navigation bar in the bottom and double tapping on home, I can do a one finger flick up and across to the left and tap my finger off to activate the home button. But again, there are those gestures that you don't have to use them if you don't want to. Now, I don't know about this, Jim, if you've talked to people about, but on VoiceOver, you've got this thing called the rotor, where you do a two-finger rotate to cycle around different options, such as navigating by character, word, or heading on a web page. And then when you've done this two-finger rotate to that option, you do a one-finger flick up and down to move by that. So if I've rotated around to character, a one-finger flick down would move me forward character by character. A one-finger flick up each time would move me back character by character. Now, what Talkback has done is it's actually set that to the rotor is actually a three-finger flick left or right to go between character, word, heading, etc., and then back to the normal one-finger flick up and down to move by that item. And Jim, I'm not quite sure whether I'd actually prefer the rotor one or the three-finger flick way of doing it. Do you have any comments on that?
I prefer the rotor, but that's probably because I'm used to it. You know, that's the thing that I use all the time.
Yeah.
I do think some of those Android gesture or Talkback gestures are pretty weird. That angle, the angle stuff, I have a lot of trouble remembering it. Yeah, it's unless you do it day in, day out, it really is quite awkward.
Exactly, because I was sitting there the other day, and I think because I was trying to remember what the command is for navigation to bring up the notification center, because on Samsung you can do a two-finger drag down the screen that brings up notifications. So the Talkback angle one is dragging down the bottom, going over from right to left to the middle of the screen, and then going up. So it's a back to front letter L. But it was funny because you're right, because I hadn't used it for about 3 days, and I was sitting there going, "Oh my God, what is it?"
Yes. Yep.
So I thought, you know what? I'll just go back to doing the two fingers down the screen because that's the one I use most of the time. Now, as far as Braille support on Android's concerned, the traditional software that runs a Braille display, so that's where you've got a little 20 cell, 40 cell, or even a little 14 or 12 cell refreshable Braille display linked up via Bluetooth. The default app for that is called Brailleback. And it's funny because I was just complaining about Brailleback this morning about how it doesn't really want to connect to my Orbit Reader 20 cell Braille display. There's another one that's called Braille TTY, so BRLTTY, and that seems to work a lot more effectively. And that might jot people's memory because that's what we currently use in Windows 11 and Windows 10 to talk to external Braille displays, because it's an open source system. And there's another screen reader that if you don't really want to use Talkback and you want a bit better experience, it's called Commentary. Now, this particular one, you get a demo version, then you've got to pay for it if you want to use it. I think it's more flexible than Talkback, and it feels like you're using a full-blown screen reader. But you've what's got a called sideload it, so you can't get it from the Google Play Store. If you search for Commentary screen reader on the web, it'll come up as a search result in Google or whatever else you might be using, and then you can just install it, and that one works very nicely. So moving on from speech and Braille, Jim, have you played with some of the low vision options such as color contrast and changing colors and fonts on Android?
Literally played with them, haven't used them to any great degree, but yeah, they work, and they work very similar to iOS. So the reversing the color background, that sort of thing. One of the things with reverse mode, of course, is the weird and wonderful thing is that you have unexpected features. For instance, if you have a dark background on your home screen, reversing it will make it a light background. So on menus and your contacts where you'd normally have a white background, it'll change it to dark, and that's nice. But you flip back to your home screen and it's all white, so it sort of just glares at you. So it's a couple of things that you just need to think about like that. You'd need to, if that's a permanent feature, you probably need to change the color of your wallpaper on your home screen.
Yeah, and just to go through some of the low vision options that the system does has, and again, you can go through these in the settings, accessibility, and have a look at them. And these sound very familiar from an iOS point of view. So you've got high contrast themes, so things like black and white on black, reverse video. You've got high contrast fonts to make the fonts stand out in high contrast keyboard. So if you have difficulty seeing the keyboard, and one of the things about iOS with Android in particular, and I guess like as iOS, you can change the amount of keyboards that you can change and use on Android is absolutely amazing. So whatever keyboard you like, you can practically use it, because it basically just works. The whole keyboard system, you can change whatever you like. But the high contrast one will just make the keyboard much easier to see. It doesn't really matter what the keyboard is, whether it's a Samsung keyboard, a Google keyboard, a Microsoft keyboard, or whatever. You've also, and Jim just mentioned this before, color inversion, color adjustment, and that's where you can adjust the specific colors of the screen as well. So that's, again, I think Apple just calls that color contrast. You can remove animation, so you can make the screen sort of not jump up and down and bop all over the place. Of course, magnification, as just Jim mentioned, the temporary one, and then you've also got full screen magnification as well. And then you've got other accessibility options. So you've got hearing enhancements, live transcribe, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So basically that will live transcribe any audio happening on the phone, which is actually pretty amazing if you're a deaf person and you want to be able to communicate and or enjoy audio content or a video coming up on the screen. And of course, that also comes under live captions. So you've got live captions for video content plus the live transcribe as well. Sound notifications. So you might be familiar with that on Android. So when you've got a barking dog, an alarm going off, a horn beeping, I don't know why they say this, but somebody yelling or even just raising their voice, you can get a sound notification to let you know that that sound has happened in your vicinity. Hearing aid support, which is actually very good. Another one called ambient sound amplification. So that's where that you might be using your phone almost like a hearing aid. So it amplifies the ambient sound around you so that you can actually hear your environment better. So that's actually pretty interesting as well. And of course, also mono audio. So again, if you've got a hearing issue, rather than listening to audio out of two stereo speakers, left and right, they just put the stereo into one mono stereo channel. So you're effectively listening to one speaker almost like in the middle when you're listening to audio. And then, of course, we've got universal switch control for using switches, and that's where you can plug in either a USB or a Bluetooth switch, and you can control your phone if you've only got, mobility issues with your hand, just to tap a switch to move the cursors around and select items on the screen just by pressing one button. You've got assistive control, similar to the iPhone, where you can, rather than having hardware buttons like the up and down volume and your Bixby button on Samsung, these are all controlled via the assistive touch or the assistive control on Android. And then we've also got voice assistant. So rather than, and I'm not talking about voice assistants as in Google or the A-Lady, Alexa, this is actually saying, this is voice control of your phone. So you can say open Audible, for example, and press the play button to start the book playing, all done via your voice. And I should say you've also got an option to control Talkback via this voice assistant stuff as well. So you can say things like, you can have the screen reader speak faster, speak slower, and other options as well. And I haven't tried this one, but you've also got control over the mouse pointer if you're plugged in a mouse. And of course, like any operating system, you've also got, if you plug in a keyboard, you've also got sticky keys, repeat keys, slow keys, and they're just the way that the keyboard responds when you hold down a key for too long, or you might be a bit shaky and the system's giving you enough time to press a key without acting on it. So they're probably the main accessibility options, but I just wanted to mention that, and this is one thing that I find annoying about Samsung, because it's got this dedicated Bixby button on the side. You can't change that button to just launch the Bixby screen reader, the Bixby personal assistant, to any other one like Google or the A-Lady. So what I do on my Samsung phone, if I want to use the Magic A-Lady one for the Amazon Echo, or want to use Google Assistant, I do a one finger double tap and hold on the home button, and then I can launch either of those two options. What does the LG do? Do you know, Jim, about, does it allow you to assign the personal assistant to a button, or do you just have to launch it from the home screen?
I don't think so. I don't believe it does.
Yeah, because that'd be quite handy.
I could be wrong, but it's. Oh, sorry. No, now that I think about it, it's actually a long hold on the power button.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, you can do that.
Okay, so, and I'm assuming you can assign that wherever you want to launch Google Assistant or the A-Lady as well.
I'm pretty sure it's only Google Assistant.
Okay. Yeah. And look, I must say, Bixby's, I mean, dare I say, Bixby is probably the same irritating as about Siri is sometimes. So she, because it's mainly a female voice, is very good for opening up apps. They've also got Bixby Vision, which is like the Lookout app for object recognition and text recognition as well. I don't find it works that well. The weird thing about Bixby, though, I've actually found that if I try and say something like play Vision Australia Radio Melbourne, or I say play ABC Sydney Radio, it doesn't want to do it. So I've got to go into an app and actually run it that way. But if I use Google Assistant and I use A-Lady as an Amazon Alexa, then it works perfectly fine. So it's a bit weird that the way that the personal assistants actually work on Android. Have we missed anything to do with accessibility, Jim, that we should mention? Oh, Jimmy there?
I think Jim has...
He might have stepped out for briefly, that's right. Yep. Yes. That's okay. All right, so let me move. So that's accessibility. Oh, sorry, one thing I forgot to mention about accessibility, going back to Talkback, you also have a Braille input keyboard. So like you can do with VoiceOver on the iPhone, where you can switch on this, what's called a Braille screen input, and that's where you can use your 6 fingers as corresponding to your 6 dots in Braille to type in Braille. You can have that same Braille input keyboard on Android as well with Talkback, and that, I must say, that works beautifully. And it's very similar to what you do on VoiceOver on the iPhone. So you rotate around to your keyboard, say on the iPhone style thing, and then you start brailing. And if you want to get rid of the last character, you can flick back to the left. If you want to put in a space, you flick to the right, and so on. So very similar gestures between the Braille screen input keyboard on VoiceOver and iOS as in the Android Talkback screen for Braille input. Works just as nicely. So let me go and grab my little magic document here, and I was just going to remind you what some of the apps were like that you can also get on Android. So let me just open up my apps here, and I'm just going to flick through these really quickly just to give a reminder, because a lot of people say to me, oh, look, a lot of the common apps I can't use on Android, or they're not on Android, but there's getting more and more, and I find most of them work really nicely. So I'm just going to read these out fairly quick. I'm not going to spend any time on them because they're pretty self-explanatory what they are. And keep in mind, these are from both your iPhone or Android, and both work very well with accessibility. So we've got 13 cabs for booking a cab, channel 7, 10 play for channel 10, SBS on demand, ABC iView, which of course is the iView streaming application for the ABC Listen for all the ABC radio stations, podcasts, and of course they've also got audio books in there as well now. We've got the IRA service, so AIRA, which is the video service where you've got somebody looking for a camera and can give you assistance via the camera, and of course that's a paid subscription service. My favourite store, Aldi, because I like checking in on a Wednesday and a Saturday to see what specials they've got for the week. So that's Aldi. Amazon Alexa, of course, for use with the Amazon Alexa personal assistant, and of course that's where you can also make changes to all your Amazon style devices. Amazon Shopping, Amazon Music, Amazon Prime, which is the video streaming service from Amazon. Apple Music's also available on Android. Audible, which is one of my favorite app for all the Audible books that you can get through on Amazon. Be My Eyes is the free type video service that you talk to a volunteer, and again, they can look through your camera, talk to you, you can talk back to them to get assistance with, what's in the pantry, where the taxi is at a taxi rank, the same type of stuff you can do with IRA, except Be My Eyes is free.
Just one thing with that one, David, you really got to be careful about getting them to read a document that could be sensitive, because it is an individual somewhere around the world and you don't know who's doing it. So you just got to be a little bit careful with that one.
Exactly. And I say, even though that IRA is a lot, I wouldn't say it's not more professional, but you are giving people access to your personal information about using the video camera. So I always say, anybody you wouldn't feel like your partner not seeing, then don't show anybody, because yes, you are dealing with a complete stranger. So it's, using a bit of common sense. I'm just going to switch past a few of the games because, actually, no, I don't mention this one. Jim, have you ever played Blind Drive?
No. It sounds really good.
It's really cool. You're actually a person driving this car against the traffic, and you've got to avoid the traffic coming towards you left and right by basically swerving or tapping on each side of the screen or moving the phone left and right. And it's really cool because you go through all these different, you go for a thunderstorm, you go for a tunnel, you're on a highway, it's pouring with rain. It's just absolutely incredible, and that's free. And that's called Blind Drive. So that's one of my favourite all-time games at the moment. Of course, we've got Coronavirus Australia, Calm, for listening to different types of calm type meditation music. That's just a paid subscription, that one. Cash Reader, which is the one for reading printed notes. Now, I don't think there's any, are there any other cash identification apps for Android, Jim? Because I think that's
Not
the
that I
main
know
one, isn't it,
of.
at the moment?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Chrome web browser, which is the Chrome is the main browser that I tend to recommend most people use anyway. So unlike using Safari on iOS or Microsoft Edge, or you can also use Microsoft Edge on Android, I'm assuming as well, but Chrome's the main one. Coles shopping at Show. Good old Dropbox, which is the one that I use between all my devices, Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android for sharing documents. Disney streaming, eBay shopping, good old Facebook for Facebook. Where am I? Google Assistant. And now, I remember on Android, it's actually not called Google Assistant. If you go and look at the app screens, it's just called Assistant, by the way. It's actually not called Google Assistant. It's just Assistant. Google Playbooks, and that's both audio books and ebooks. But I'd suggest, Jim, for those, my go-to for audiobooks is still Audible. And rather than Google Play ebooks, I still recommend Amazon Kindle. Just because of the selection, and it's more transferable between different operating systems anyway. You've got Google Fit, which is the Google Fitness app from Google. Google Duo, which is the video conferencing service from Google, like using FaceTime on the iPhone. Google Home, which is the Home app. It's like the Amazon Alexa app, but in this case, rather than controlling Echo Dot devices, it's controlling third-party devices, including the Google Nest, the Google Mini, the Google Studio, and so on. How can we forget Google Maps? And then we've also got Google News, Google Play Music, and the GPS app that I tend to recommend for Android that works really well is called Lazzarello. And let me just check the spelling of this. It's Lazzarello, so it's Lazarrillo, Lazzarello. And that reminds me very much like Blind Square on excuse me, on the iPhone. It works really nicely. Lookout. Now, Lookout reminds me in some ways of the Seeing AI app for doing short text reading in particular. You simply point your camera at at some text, and it will start reading it straight away. It works really nicely.
There's another app as well, David, called Speak, exclamation mark, or one word, SPEAK, exclamation mark. That's a really good one for the OCRing stuff.
Oh, okay. That's good. Is there any third-party applications that you'd recommend for magnification, like using your Android phone as a video magnification camera?
Not really. There's 1,000 of them out there, literally. And it's really just, playing. And generally, just the camera works really well. So, yeah, it's one of those things where you can have a lot of those magnification apps, but you really only can use the camera if that's what you want.
Yeah, and look, you can always, there's stacks of free stuff on Android anyway, so you can always download stuff and you can delete it. So you simply download and install the application, even from within the Google Play Store. If you bring it up again, you can uninstall it from there. Or you can go into Settings, Apps, and just get rid of it from inside that settings screen as well. And then I'm not going to go through the rest of the apps because they're mainly common ones, but two ones that I use all the time is Microsoft Outlook, of course, and then also Twitter, because I'm an avid Twitter user, and of course the Vision Australia Vision Connect app is also available.
Of course, my favourite one as well, of course, is Bunnings. The Bunnings app's fantastic because you can actually look for a product. It'll tell you what aisle it's in. In your local store. The same with the Coles and the Woolworths apps. They do the same thing.
Oh, I didn't realise it about Bunnings.
Yeah, no, it's a new one. Works really well.
Oh, that's funny because I've got to go and pick out some flooring I've got to go and pick out some flooring for our floor in about 2 weeks' time, And my wife and I were only talking about this last night. She said, I might just have a look at the website initially for Bunnings, because she said the thing I hate about Bunnings is you go in there and you end up having to walk from one end of the whole building to the other.
Well, interestingly, it tells you what aisle it's in, plus what bay it's in
Oh,
that
wow.
aisle. So you're still going to find it when you're there, but yeah.
Yeah, but at least you don't have to sort of then start wandering around and go, oh, yeah, look, there's the garden section that's probably near there.
Yeah, yes.
Because those places are huge. It's just ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So we have about 10 minutes left, guys. And we just have some comments from some of our viewers. Adrian has mentioned Envision app.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Good one.
Paul has also mentioned the Visor app
Magnification.
for magnification,
Yeah.
which has great contrast enhancements, features, etc. So thank you for those recommendations.
Yeah, very much.
No, they're really good ones as well. Yeah, and the Envision one's almost like the Envision smart glasses, except of course it's an app running on Android. Now, before we read on, I know we'd said we'd mention other stuff. Did you want to briefly talk about Android TV, Jim?
Yeah, Android TVs. There's I guess two main systems. There's Samsung that uses its own internal system for accessibility, but just about everyone else is using Android TV, and there's two versions. If you get a Sony TV or one of the TVs that uses Android TV is version 9, and Google TV is version 10. Slight difference between the two, but the same principle. You've got, once the accessibility is turned on, you've got full accessibility to your TV, in that if you're changing channels, it'll tell you what channel you're on. So it'll say channel 9, a current affair, 7 till 7:30. If you hit your right arrow, it'll then tell you whatever program is on after that. But as with all smart TVs these days, they've got Netflix and Stan and all the other streaming services. So when if you've got a subscription to those and you go into it, then there's the speech, which is virtually Talkback. The speech will speak everything in there. Great with Netflix. You can use your left and right arrow keys to go through the programs. It'll tell you what the program is. If you hover on it, it'll actually then read out the synopsis for that particular program. They work really well, and with certainly with the Sony TVs and Samsungs, you can go into the settings as well and change your different settings for brightness and everything else, which you haven't been able to do in the past. But the last few years, it's really made a difference to being able to enjoy your TV a lot more and be able to do things that you haven't been able to do before.
So, Jim, are you pretty much okay to go and buy? I mean, if you hear a TV's got Android TV, are you pretty much safe to assume that it does have the built-in screen reading and other options in it?
I would still get the person at the shop to turn it on and make sure. Because Sony has, for instance, a few different models. The Bravias should all be ready to go, but there are your slightly cheaper models that have Android, but a real stripped down version of it. So look, I'd just say to the person on the at the store, turn it on, go into accessibility, turn on Talkback, and I just want to make sure it's working. And most a lot of the TVs these days also have a dictation button or a microphone on the on the remote control, so you can just press that and say Netflix or in fact with Google TV, if you ask for a particular program and it knows it's on Netflix, it'll start Netflix.
Oh, very cool.
Or Stan, so it will recommend different programs. So yeah, it takes sometimes you need sighted assistance to start that ball rolling when you've got a brand new TV. But once it's up and running, it's really good.
Because I've been thinking about updating my little Samsung TV, which talks. I think it's it's now 5 or 6 years old. But one thing I always found about that was the screen reader back then wouldn't read things like Netflix was fine, but if I went into sort of any other sort of third-party app running on the smart TV, it wouldn't read it. But it sounds like what you're saying is, particularly with the current Google TV and Android TV, that the screen reader will pretty much read most of the smart apps that are coming up on the TV screen.
Definitely does. I find it kind of strange when you go into Prime Video, in that it seems to use its own voice.
Oh,
so the voice is different. It might be that it's switched a synthesizer rather than switching away from Talkback, but yeah, it has a slightly different voice. And in fact, I've just bought a new Sony TV for my computer room the other day, and you can get onto the Play Store and actually download Eloquence.
Oh, now you've sold me.
Which I thought was interesting. But there was one little feature that wouldn't work with Eloquence. So there's a little tweak in Eloquence that is sort of strange. But the normal Google voice seems to work fairly well, and you can switch to Australian.
Yes.
Google Voice, that sort of thing. So yeah, it takes a bit of getting used to.
Yeah, and for people that don't remember, Eloquence is the very robotic voice that originally Jaws used to have. Yeah. But for die-hard screen reader users who just want speed out of nothing else, it still remains my favourite speech synthesizer. So wherever I can get my hands on Eloquence, that's my go-to voice synthesizer. Tony, just checking in our time sequence. How are we going for time?
Have 4 minutes left, and I have a comment from Jane, who is dialing from the US. She mentioned that it seems like pairing Braille displays can be a hit and miss depending on the model that they're using. And she also mentioned having a bit of trouble getting used to the Braille back commands.
In fact, I was whinging about that exact thing this morning. And I got a recommendation from one of our friendly guys who actually thinks to work at Pacific Vision, Sam Taylor, and he recommended using a different application to connect to Braille display, which is called Braille TTY. So rather than using Braille back, use Braille TTY. Because unlike
BRL, isn't it?
Yeah, BRL. Yeah, BRL TTY. Because unlike VoiceOver, where you basically use VoiceOver to connect and to find and connect to your Braille display, on Android, you go onto your Bluetooth settings first, connect to your Bluetooth device, and then you go into your Braille back or Braille TTY, and then that initializes the Braille display stuff with the Braille display. So it's done slightly different. Now, I must admit, when I tried Braille BRL TTY with my Orbit Reader 20 this afternoon or this morning, it would allow me to go left and right, but it wouldn't allow me to press the middle button on sort of the round joystick in between dot 1 and dot 4 to go into an option. So I may not have done that properly, but I do find using a Braille display is a lot more finicky than using Braille on iOS. I think I said on Twitter this morning, it feels like I've got to be a software engineer to understand how Brailleback or Braille or BRL TTY works. Whereas just in the VoiceOver on the iPhone with Braille, it just works to start off with.
Yeah, it's not fantastic on Android.
No. And if you listen to people like Jonathan Mosen on Mosen Explosion and other places, people still say it's not quite there. But overall, I'd say Talkback for the screen reader experience on Android is not too bad these days. I can certainly use my Z3 flip phone as my work phone or my personal phone. There's no problem. And in actual fact, the other day, I actually left home without my iPhone for the first time in God knows how long. And I wasn't scared. I didn't panic. I didn't think, I haven't got my iPhone with me. It was like, oh, yeah, I've got my Z3 Flip. If my children or my wife need me, I can still answer the phone. I can still send them SMS messages and all that sort of cool stuff. So any final comments, Jim, about Android in general?
I think Android's definitely a really good phone for someone who's partially sighted, who can see the screen. The screens are great. The prices are cheaper. To me, if speech is a really important factor, I'd still go with the iPhone. I just think it's a slightly better system. A few years back, we would have said, don't touch an Android. These days, you definitely can.
Yep.
It just depends on what you want out of the system.
Yep. And I should say in closing that if you want more information or need to have a chat about somebody about Android phones or Android versus Apple or whatever else it might be, please feel free to contact the AT Help Desk at Vision Australia. And of course, you can do that via the main Vision Australia number, which is 1300 847 466. And that number again is 1300 847 466. Or you can email the AT Help Desk at athelp@visionaustralia.org, and you can talk to the guys there about Android, Talkback, Braille, TTY, anything you like. The guys at Vision Australia are very knowledgeable about all these different types of products as well. And I failed to mention one thing that I'll maybe do it in another time. I didn't get to talk about the the Galaxy Watch Classic 4. But in summary, it's nowhere near as good as the Apple Watch. Again, if you're low vision, it probably doesn't make too much difference, but especially the speech experience using Talkback, it's a lot more sluggish on the Galaxy Watch than it is with VoiceOver on the Apple Watch. So if you put the Apple Watch back to maybe Series 0, back at the beginning, that's what the Talkback is like on the Galaxy Watch. It's very, very sluggish. But anyway, I will pass it back to Tony to finish off the webinar for today.
Thank you so much, David and Jim, for such an informative session on Android. And thank you everyone for attending. At the end of this webinar, there will be a short survey for you to complete. Any feedback that you can provide will assist us in improving our content and delivery of future webinars. We'll love you to join us for the next Exploring Technology webinar with David Woodbridge in April. So please check your emails and our website for further details. Once again, thank you, David and Jim, and thank you everyone, and goodbye.
Vision Australia.
Blindness,
low vision,
Opportunity.
Vision Australia logo. 3 navy blue ovals linked together diagonally within a bright yellow rectangle.